Chapter 9. Mae West came to Paris. She lay on the operating table in my atelier, carefully measured and examined. The actress sent me every intimate detail of her silhouette, and to ensure absolute accuracy, she even shipped a life-size plaster cast of herself in the pose of the Venus de Milo. She was preparing for a new film that kept changing from the start. At first, Jo Swerling wrote the script as a drama and titled it Frivolous Walk, but Mae decided otherwise. She rewrote it entirely and called it Sapphire Cell. Disgusted, Jo Swerling hung the original script on a tree, declaring it a target for children's slingshots. Mae spent 10 days in bed rewriting everything, then telegraphed me to start designing the dresses. A lilac wool riding coat with a rounded front hem was to be worn with lace stockings and a twisted pink lilac belt. It was paired with a violet hat, its brim lifted on one side and adorned with a red feather. That was the simplest of her outfits, her daytime ensemble. Then came the afternoon dress, green wool with sheer guipure lace, followed by another with a wildflower print and pale blue satin lapels. And then there were many others. For instance, an evening gown made of black tulle decorated with pink taffeta roses and green leaves, to be worn with a hat trimmed with enormous ostrich feathers. Mae West told people she was coming to Paris for fittings. I had planned a sensational evening at Maxim's, where she would appear in her most seductive look, marking the beginning of a lilac fashion period. But to the great disappointment of my young seamstresses, who adored her, Mae never showed up. All that remained were the plaster cast and the hourglass silhouette. Fashion is born from small incidents, subtle trends, even political consequences, not from pleats, ruffles, or trinkets. That type of clothing is too easily copied. Such methods might be fruitful commercially, but they hold no artistic interest. The world was being stretched in every direction like a balloon. We must never forget that a steel weight is tied to our ankles, and that's the hard reality of this business. One must read the signs of history and stay ahead of them. The hourglass silhouette won over many of my models, though not all of them had the bust to fill it. At the time, breasts were taboo, especially in America, where women wrapped themselves tightly to hide them. One model wanted to be a bit more daring. Secretly, she conspired with the seamstress fitting her into a very tight blue dress and decided to help nature along. From that moment on, she started stuffing handkerchiefs or stockings into her bodice, but the result wasn't quite right. She wanted the bust to stand out more and have a beautiful shape. That same evening, "It's more interesting than usual," he replied with a smirk. "You look like the Roman she-wolf. Something must have slipped." She looked down in horror. She had 4 breasts. Later, when she tried to sell that same dress to a client, claiming the woman looked like the Venus de Milo, her husband quipped, "More like Diana of Ephesus, the goddess with 1,000 breasts." Thus began the trend of the false bust. The most recent model, called Very Secret, inflated through a straw, making it seem like you were sipping mint liqueur. This trend inspired a perfume bottle shaped like a woman's figure. That bottle of Schiaparelli perfume became a sort of calling card for my fashion house. The model was sculpted by Leonore Fini. It took over a year to finalize the actual perfume composition. All that remained was to find a name and a color for the launch. It had to start with an S. I'm superstitious. Naming a perfume is terribly difficult. It feels like all the good names are taken. But the color practically leapt out at me: shiny, shocking, scandalous, irresistible, alive. It was the color of birds and fish from every part of the world, of China and Peru. Not Western at all, pure, intense, shocking. I called the perfume shocking. And the presentation would be shocking. The accessories and lingerie would be shocking too. My friends and colleagues panicked. They thought I had lost my mind. "No one's going to buy this," they warned. But despite the gloomy predictions, success came instantly. Without a single ad, the perfume was an immediate hit, and Shocking Pink became a classic. Even Dolly painted a giant straw-stuffed bear in shocking pink and installed drawers in its belly. The bear had been a gift from the eccentric Englishman Edward James, who looked like David Copperfield. Bettina borrowed the bear from Dolly for the boutique and dressed it in a pale lilac satin coat, dripping in costume jewelry. One day, the boutique was full of shoppers when Edward walked in, saw the bear, and burst into tears. "My grandfather killed this mighty white bear in the Arctic," he sobbed. "As a child, I saw him every day in our living room. And now he's here, painted pink, decked out in opera clothes, fake jewels, and made to play the clown in Paris's most daring fashion house." Customers crowded the stairways, stunned by this weeping cherub hugging a giant pink bear. Later, the young man insisted on becoming a boutique decoration himself. He wrapped himself in colorful fabrics and sat motionless in the window like a Buddha. People flocked to see the spectacle, and it took hours to convince the crowd to leave. Thanks to Shocking, Skiap launched a new business. And when hard times came, it was the perfume that kept her afloat. We filled a golden cage with spray bottles, and people would stop on the stairs to spritz themselves. Bebe Berard loved having his beard sprayed until the perfume dripped onto the little dog in his arms. Marie-Louise Bousquet, witty hostess of one of the last Parisian salons, lifted her dress and perfumed her petticoats. Dali visited often. Together, we created a coat with many pockets, inspired by one of his paintings. The black shoe-shaped hat with a felt heel poking up like a little column was another of our collaborations. Madame Reginald Fellows, Daisy to her friends, was always impeccably dressed and quick to adopt the latest craze. She even wore my lamb chop hat, white tulle on the end of the bone. That hat, more than anything else, solidified Skiap's reputation as an eccentric designer. Daisy wore it without blinking, and fashion writers never forgot it. When critics wanted to take a jab at Skiap, they'd always bring up the lamb chop hat as proof of my so-called extravagance, forgetting everything else that made my fashion house great. Jean Cocteau made sketches of heads for me. I embroidered some on the backs of evening mantles, and one, long yellow hair cascading down the back, on a gray wool suit. I often saw him. He had already dabbled in film, like his surrealist The Blood of a Poet, shot with Man Ray. The film was a success with avant-garde fans, though the public didn't quite understand it. Cocteau, once the embodiment of spirituality, had started speaking with strikingly practical arguments. His work remained brilliant, but he now considered the opinion of ordinary people. This isn't a criticism, just a note. Cocteau quickly realized that to succeed, one must accept the existence of mediocrity. Despite the rise of zippers, the button queen still reigned supreme. We used the most incredible objects: animals, feathers, caricatures, postage scales, chains, locks, clothespins, candy. Some were wood, some plastic, but none resembled traditional buttons. At the same time, our unique jewelry sold faster than ever. Ivy-shaped enamel necklaces, our first plexiglass bracelets and earrings. Talented artists designed them. One of them, Jean Clement, was a true French artisan, a genius whose passion bordered on fanaticism. He appeared just when we had lost all hope of finding something new to fasten clothes. With a triumphant grin, he'd empty his pockets into my lap, awaiting praise. When idle, he invented curious mechanical gadgets, like pins that glowed in the dark. Poet Louis Aragon and his wife Elsa Triolet designed necklaces that looked like aspirin tablets. And now, Victor Hugo's great-great-grandnephew makes our buttons. We worked hard, and played hard. One collection followed another, each with its own theme. The Pagan collection made women look like Botticelli muses, in wreaths and delicately embroidered gowns. The Astrology collection featured horoscopes, stars, moons, and suns. The wildest one was inspired by Barnum's circus. Barnum, Bailey, Grock, and the Fratellinis ran riot through my salon, up the stairs, out the windows. Prints of clowns, elephants, and horses adorned the clothes, stamped with wet paint. Instead of handbags, balls. Instead of gloves, gaiters. Instead of hats, ice cream cones. Trained dogs, scholarly monkeys. The signs of the time were embraced with joy. Nobody grumbled, but who would wear this? Amazingly, Skiap didn't lose a single conservative, aristocratic client, but gained many new ones, including all the stars. Marlene Dietrich tried on hats in her famous leg-crossed pose, cigarette in hand. Claudette Colbert winked mischievously. Norma Shearer, enough said. Merle Oberon, perfumed like the Queen of Sheba. Lauren Bacall, with her aristocratic face and Brooklyn slang, said a deep bonjour, like a musical note. Gary Cooper, shy, sea-green eyes, trailed behind his latest conquest. Michelle Morgan had just escaped her concierge mother's apartment. Annabella, a teenage boy in a woman's role, acted in Renée Clair's new film. Simone Simon squabbled with her fitter over a dress Sasha Guthrie insisted she wear. Constance Bennett turned into a fox. So many furs circled her. Gloria Swanson came. Cecile Sorel came too. Unlike Mae West, Cecile Sorel gave my staff a show. She didn't enter, she made an entrance. Part Athos, Porthos, D'Artagnan, Célimène, Nike of Samothrace, and the Madwoman of Chaillot all rolled into one. She was due at a concours d'elegance and ordered a long red cloak. We made it sweeping, but she said it wasn't long enough. It had to be longer. Much longer. We assumed she would ride in a Rolls or an Isotta Fraschini. She tested the cloak on Place Vendôme. We all rushed to the windows. Cécile climbed into a tiny open Citroën, stood tall in the back, struck her most theatrical pose, and signaled the driver to go. The brave little car spun in circles as the cloak fluttered behind her like a massive banner. After a few laps, she disembarked, dramatically flinging the train over her arm. Had there been a prize, she would have won it. Meanwhile, the mysterious marquise who leased me my apartment decided it had become far too beautiful and comfortable for me to live in. She demanded termination of the contract, an upsetting blow, especially since I was so busy I had no time to find a new place. But suddenly, a perfect home appeared. A townhouse on Rue de Berry, with a courtyard. I knew it instantly. This was my place. It's number 22. 2 twos. That adds up to 4, my lucky number. Just off one of Paris's grandest avenues, you enter a courtyard and find an old house, worn, but not crumbling. In the heart of Paris, among garages, bars, and cabarets, was a peaceful garden shaded with deep greenery. Birds from the neighborhood gathered there, doves and pigeons, fleeing the dust and noise. Next door was the Belgian embassy. A secret passage once connected the buildings. The house had belonged to Princess Matilda, cousin to Napoleon III. Later, to my surprise, I learned we were distantly related. It was affordable, though extravagant. I bought it immediately, for once striking a deal that combined love and financial sense. Balzac, Zola, Proust, and Flaubert, dear friend to Matilda, all gathered here once. More recently, the home belonged to a banking family and housed their relative, Aunt Mal, an elderly woman paralyzed in one room. The room I now chose for myself. It had a large terrace overlooking the garden. A steep iron staircase led down, which I moved for the cats. An old friend of the previous owner often came by to sing to her with a guitar. Liz Dermy wrote a glowing article about the house and dubbed it the House of Sudden Love. Everything I placed in it was chosen with love. I found treasures during country strolls and travels. Window shopping in Paris became dangerous, for my bank account. So I bought a car. To save money. I never bought things because of their market value or antiquity. The house sings to you, hugs you, and no one wants to leave. Jean Franck and Janssen helped decorate it, though my unconventional taste often stunned them. When I wanted to hang chinoiserie tapestries by Boucher in the library, Jean Franck was horrified. He hated tapestries, so did I, but these were different. I insisted on installing Chinese-style bookcases. Inspired, he painted the spaces between the tapestries to make them feel connected. Figures in brilliant colors smiled, sang, and danced across the walls. This room brought Skiap more joy than any I'd lived in. Guests gasped when doors opened to reveal golden plates and embroidered napkins. The dishes were Victorian gilt silver. I'd bought them on country walks through England. Glasses were all sizes and colors. Napkins, pink and yellow, were embroidered in gold by Bedouin women. There were no flowers. The luxury lay in the unexpected color and arrangement. One doesn't need millions to set a dazzling table. Under a glass canopy at the entrance stood 2 wooden sentinels, Mr. and Mrs. Satan. I found them in Edinburgh. Dark and mysterious, they stood out in a gloomy old shop. I bought Mrs. Satan first and took her to my London home. 2 years later, I spotted Mr. Satan outside that same shop, shivering in the fog, which the Scots call mist and we call rain. Poor old man, born in Venice, looked so miserable I pitied him. I bought him for half of what I'd paid for his wife, thus outwitting the Scots. Now they stand happily together on Rue de Berry, welcoming guests with piercing eyes and sly smiles. She, with raised bust and raised arm, as if warning, he, with goatee and horns, also raising one hand. Both twisted into S shapes, with hooves instead of feet. Like tossing coins into the Trevi fountain, you're supposed to place something in Mr. Satan's hand if you want to return. Most people do.